Bueno, ya vamos a ir dando comienzo entonces, ¿no? ¿Te parece bien? Bueno, aquí estoy con Mariana Corada, quien fue la responsable de toda la organización de este evento. Le agradezco en primer lugar a Mariana y les agradezco a todos ustedes por el tiempo, por estar presentes, siempre atentos a las novedades de Alta Genetics en todo el mundo y aquí en Latinoamérica en particular. En el día de hoy, en esta jornada, tratando de conectar con todos ustedes, vamos a tener mucha presencia internacional con algunas charlas técnicas que queríamos presentarles. Eh, Antes de comenzar, les voy a dar algunos avisos parroquiales, como suele decir nuestro amigo Miguel Algorta, para que todos puedan disfrutar de esta reunión y de estas presentaciones. Eh, Vamos a contar con dos disertantes internacionales de URUS, una persona del programa PIC y otra persona de Alta Genetics, a las cuales voy a introducir ahora en breve. Ellos obviamente hablan en inglés y ustedes van a tener la opción de escucharlos tanto en inglés como en español con una traducción en simultáneo a través de la traductora que siempre nos ayuda, la amiga Soledad Ibarra, que va a estar presente haciendo la traducción. Para poder escuchar la traducción en español, van a tener que acceder dentro de la pantalla de Zoom. Debajo de la pantalla van a ver una serie de opciones y hay una opción que se llama interpretación, ¿no, Mariana? Interpretación. Cliqueando ahí van a tener que elegir la opción en español para poder escuchar la presentación traducida. En el caso de que elijan la opción en inglés, van a escuchar la traducción en inglés. Obviamente les recomiendo que vayan a la traducción en simultáneo, que es la opción de español. Las instrucciones para eso también están en el chat de la reunión, pero es muy sencillo. Cualquier duda pueden escribir ahí. Lo mismo durante la presentación, si tienen preguntas, pueden ir haciéndolas en la opción de preguntas y respuestas para que luego de las presentaciones puedan los disertantes ayudarnos a responder esas preguntas. Bueno, luego de estos avisos parroquiales, les doy las gracias a todos. Para quienes no me conocen, mi nombre es Santiago Yang, yo soy vicepresidente de ventas para Latinoamérica para Alta Genetics y es un placer darle continuidad a esta reunión para distribuidores de Latinoamérica que iniciamos hace algunos meses, creo que ya fueron más de 3 o 4 meses la última reunión. En esta oportunidad y luego de un poco el feedback que recibimos de esa reunión, decidimos avanzar con información técnica y relevante de lo que está ocurriendo en la industria lechera en todo el mundo. Por eso vamos a tener estas presentaciones hoy aquí. Voy a mostrarles rápidamente la agenda. Díganme si la ven adecuadamente. Bueno, luego de esta pequeña presentación, vamos a tener dos charlas de aproximadamente media hora cada una, con un espacio para preguntas, por supuesto, que les recomiendo que las vayan escribiendo en la medida que vayan escuchando la presentación. También las pueden hacer con el micrófono abierto luego de cada una de las presentaciones. Hoy nos van a acompañar dos grandes amigos de URUS y de Alta Genetics. En primer lugar, Phil Bachman, quien se ha unido al mundo de URUS hace ya casi 5 años, primeramente trabajando para Alta Genetics y ya hace casi 3 años como responsable de producto global para la empresa PIC. Como ustedes saben, PIC es una empresa del grupo de URUS, es quien abastece de genética a Alta Genetics y al resto de las empresas del grupo. Phil es un gran especialista en genética bovina y él nos va a hablar hoy en particular de la fertilidad, del concepto de fertilidad, ¿no? Durante muchos años hemos hablado del DPR como un rasgo súper importante que lo ha sido en su momento. Hoy la industria ha mudado un poco y cuenta con nuevas herramientas para la selección por fertilidad. Y Phil nos va a contar acerca de eso en una charla súper interesante que espero que sea de mucha utilidad para todos ustedes. Luego de la presentación de Phil y luego de las preguntas que tengamos para él, vamos a contar con otro gran amigo de la casa de Alta Genetic, David Hill, David hace 28 años que está trabajando para Alta Genetics en Estados Unidos. Phil también está en Estados Unidos, basado en Madison. David está en Estados Unidos hace 28 años trabajando para Alta. Es el especialista de programas Advantage en Estados Unidos y además de eso es el coordinador del draft de Alta. Del draft es la rutina que tenemos cada 2 meses para seleccionar los nuevos toros que van a ingresar a Alta, y tanto Phil como David trabajan en conjunto para elegir los mejores toros para Alta Genetics a nivel global, así que es un especialista en genética que ha estado trabajando en la empresa por muchísimo tiempo y nos va a hablar acerca de la herramienta que tenemos, que es el Bull Search, para creación de un plan genético, y algunos conceptos muy interesantes acerca de cómo ayudar a nuestros clientes a tomar las mejores decisiones desde el punto de vista genético. No los quiero aburrir más con esta pequeña introducción, pero quería así dar las gracias tanto a Phil como a David por su tiempo, por su disponibilidad, por su entusiasmo cuando los invitamos a participar de esta reunión. Los dos estuvieron sumamente proactivos y abiertos y encantados de poder participar, así que espero que puedan aprovecharlos y disfrutarlos, y por favor no dejen de hacer las preguntas que tengan. Tenemos una convocatoria altísima con más de 60 personas del mundo de Alta en Latinoamérica, de todos los países creo que están representados, así que les agradezco nuevamente y los dejo en manos de Phil en primer lugar. Les recuerdo la opción de interpretación, eligiendo el modo español para poder escuchar. Si alguien tiene inconvenientes, nos puede escribir por privado o en el mismo chat de la reunión. Así que, bueno, Soledad y Phil, los dejo con la primera presentación y les agradezco el tiempo.
I'm real privileged to join you all this evening my time, afternoon, probably in other parts of Latin America. Yes, my name is Phil Bachman. I've been with Peak for almost 3 years as the global product specialist. My background extends back through Alta Genetics as well, so I have a little bit of blue blood as well, and grew up on my family's dairy farm here in the U.S. And it's a real pleasure to talk about cattle genetics and to share some insights into moving forward as we attempt to keep doing better for our producers, those that rely on our genetic expertise in some part of the world today. Let's see here. As you all know, Peak is really divided into three particular. Let me see here. Three particular departments. They revolve around genetics. That's where I spend most of my time, is in the genetics world today. And as was already brought up, I help lead the Peak draft. Of course, David Hill selects for Alta Genetics, and it is certainly an interesting process that I enjoy leading. Another part of what Peak does is our Peak production. They manage the bulls across North America for semen production at our various sites. We won't spend too much time on that, but it's certainly a large part of what we do. Finally, our third department is our research and development team. This team is really designed to maximize both genetics and semen production and to lead our industry forward through our research and development within the Peak program. Today, however, I want to talk to you about a topic that is very important. It is what I call fertility 2.0. It is our chance to evolve in this industry specifically how we select for reproductive efficiency on our dairy cattle today. I'm going to go through three parts in my presentation. The background on fertility should be fairly basic for most of you, but I will provide a brief breakdown of our background around fertility selection. I'll talk about our tools today for genetic selection, for fertility, for reproductive efficiency. And then finally, I'll present our opportunity for a shift and why we need to shift our strategy when it comes to genetic selection for fertility. So first, background on fertility. Why is reproduction important? Of course, this is all pretty basic. Without reproduction, none of us would have a job today, more than likely, at least in the field that we're in today. Reproduction is important because it starts and restarts the lactation, is important for milk production, certainly. At the end of the day, if our cows are older and they can advance in their lactations, we have more potential for milk production in the next lactation, whatever that may be, than the current lactation that a cow is in today. With efficient reproduction programs, we have a reduced need for replacements or young stocks. We can be more efficient in the young stocks that are produced. Good reproduction gives us lower cull rates or conversely a lower replacement rate for our herds. And certainly reproduction has a major impact on the herds that
Sorry.
we today. Yep.
You are not sharing your screen.
Oh, I'm not. Oh,
Yes.
that is a problem. Let me get that set up. My apologies for that. Okay, here we go. Does that look better?
Yes, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, my apologies.
Yes.
We didn't miss. Yeah, didn't miss too much. That was really my first major slide. So we'll give you that one. Okay. Certainly, it has a major impact. Reproduction has a major impact on herd profitability. Marginal rate of return, though, as reproduction improves, we know that the first step is always the most beneficial, and then each step thereafter has slightly less return than whatever the first step was in our reproduction system. Someone that's internationally renowned, Dr. Paul Fricke, calls good reproduction a high fertility cycle. A lot of things flow through with good reproduction. If we're able to get cows pregnant early, that keeps body condition off of these cows. That will mean that they have fewer health events when they go through the transition period. And of course, a better transition period means that cows are able to get pregnant easier, and it kind of flows together as a cycle. You can think of this when we're positively when we're making positive progress as a high fertility cycle. The reverse would be a vicious cycle. When these things starts going the wrong direction, we end up with a pretty unprofitable system. At the end of the day, though, however in depth you want to get about it, we can boil it down to this statement here: good repro equals more options. And I think a lot of our farmers today have realized the benefits of good reproduction and have made their plans to improve their reproduction on a lot of different levels today. At its heart, pregnancy really comes down to two events. We have an insemination event, and that insemination has to turn into a conception event. Really two parts of the equation. If you think about pregnancy rate, that's simply our insemination rate as a function combined with our conception rate. That's really what we're looking at when we think about a pregnancy and the factors that are involved. Of course, there are the things involved both on the cow side and on the management side or the environment side of the equation that can affect both of these avenues. When we break this down into a further matrix, we can see that there are lots and lots of different factors that go into a good reproduction system today that can influence the outcome of our repro programs. Of course, genetics is one of those many things that are involved in reproduction today. When we see it in relation to all the other factors, it starts to explain why our fertility traits, why our reproduction traits have a relatively low heritability, especially when we compare them to some other things like our conformation traits or production traits within our cows today. these are relatively small numbers, and that's simply because there are a lot of factors at play when we think about reproduction. That's why reproduction is important. We'll move on to the next section here, which is our genetic selection for fertility. We'll talk about a few different things. I'll go through a timeline of our traits as we've evolved through our industry today. Really, we often forget that one of our very first fertility traits that was introduced in the US system was productive life. This was introduced 30 years ago. I was still a pretty young kid when this happened. David, I won't ask your age when we get to that point. But productive life really is the original fertility trait. And it really is represented as the change in months that a cow is in the herd today. We can think of this primarily as longevity, but really longevity happens for lots of reasons. One, and certainly not the least of which, is that they're able to conceive and move to the next lactation. Then about 20 years ago, we gained this trait that really so many people recognize today, and that's our daughter pregnancy rate, or most people simply call it DPR. This trait, as advertised, is a change in pregnancy rate on the progeny from a particular bull. This is expressed in whole percentage points. We would expect daughters that are +1 to be 1 pregnancy rate percentage point higher than the average of the population. Now, what's tricky about this is that daughter pregnancy rate is really calculated not from animals' pregnancy rate, but really from their days open. And this is where we start to see some challenges with this trait. I'll go into a little more detail on that coming up. But realize that at its heart, it should account for both the insemination portion and the conception portion of creating a pregnancy. Then in 2009, so just about 15 years ago, we were introduced to these two relatively new by the other standards, conception rate traits. One is cow conception rate, the other is heifer conception rate. And as their names sound, they're calculated from cow insemination performance and the subsequent conception from those events. It's a pretty straightforward interpretation. There isn't that added step like daughter pregnancy rate has. These are just conception rate traits. And then finally, we have really our newest fertility trait, and that's early first calving. This is represented as change in days of age at first calving and is calculated from that age in first calving. Okay, so I want to kind of put you through 2 steps here. When we think about reproduction 25 years ago, really our goal at that time was to reverse the trend for fertility. We had selected for milk production so heavily for so long that our reproduction ability had started to decline and decline pretty rapidly, especially in the Holstein breed today. So when we started putting some attention on this, we really saw things rebound. When we look at pregnancy rate across the Holstein population in the US, the last 25 years or so has been a real comeback story. This has been a real reversal of what the trend was, and that's been very exciting to see within our industry today. So on the left, we see simply the pregnancy rate. On the right, we see days open. Our days open have reduced by somewhere around 35 points in the industry today. That's a game changer. This will also, the conception rate of our cows has increased about 5 percentage points, 5 or 6 percentage points in that particular time frame as well. These all paint really rosy pictures. We have certainly seen major improvements in reproduction today. So then I would love to just stop the presentation here, give myself a pat on the back and all those that care about genetics and say we fix things. However, when we look at our genetic trend for daughter pregnancy rate, that really doesn't paint the same rosy picture that we saw before. Really, at best, our daughter pregnancy rate has flatlined over the last 15 or 20 years. This is not a trait that we've really reversed the curve, but really we've at best stopped the decline for daughter pregnancy rate. So if we wanted to be honest with ourselves, we could say that DPR maybe isn't a win in this department, at least when it comes to genetics. Now, however, when we look at our conception rate trend, this is where we can see our genetics really contributing. In the purple line, we have cow conception rate. In the gray line, we have heifer conception rate. And really, we've seen both of these traits improve, especially since they were introduced in 2009 and then put into the net merit formula about 5 years later. So that is a yes. I think we have made genetic improvement on that sense. So what's happening with DPR? One of the challenges with DPR is how DPR is calculated. Days open is what really drives DPR. When we make this calculation for DPR, we assume that the voluntary wait period for DPR, voluntary wait period in our herds, is 60 days. This is really what's been designed for this particular trait. And the direct calculation for this is 1 daughter pregnancy rate point is equal to 4 days open. So every 1 point increase is 4 fewer days open. 1 point decrease is for 4 more days open. That's a pretty direct line here, and is why we see this straight black line when we see the formula for a DPR expressed on a graph. So when DPR was introduced about 20 years ago, the average days open was 154. That was a pretty big deal. And today, and that really holds true pretty well when we look at our trend between that 160 to 120, that actual line for pregnancy rate compared to days open is really close to that true line for DPR. However, when our reproduction continues to get better, we start to see the relationship start to disappear between true pregnancy rate and real days open. This is even more impactful when we start to realize that not all voluntary wait periods are the same, and as our voluntary wait periods increase, the relationship with the true conversion to pregnancy rate really starts to dissolve, and the DPR formula really doesn't provide what we need in a true trait to predict pregnancy rate. So at the end of the day, we also realize that a lot of our management programs today are able to overcome the genetics for low DPR. We've certainly improved a lot of our management techniques, whether that's through synchronization programs or through activity systems. These have been a real game changer for our system today, and really exposes why a DPR hasn't really seen a real improvement over time. And a lot of our farms today really aren't trying to aggressively lower their days open across their whole herd. Many farms are finding a place where they're happy keeping a specific days open. I know many farms that are under 100 days open, for instance, they're really not interested in driving that significantly lower over time. And a true testament to that is the fact that their voluntary wait period keeps increasing as they're happy where a cow is when she starts to become pregnant in our systems today. Then the other factor that really contributes quite heavily in our system today is there's a real negative correlation between our production traits and DPR. DPR is really the largest of our fertility traits when it comes to that resistance to production traits. I coined this picture here today. I'll try to trademark it later, maybe make some money off of it. But when we think about selecting for production and DPR at the same time, it's like being in a rowboat where you're rowing in two different directions. At the end of the day, one of those directions will probably win and you'll move in that direction, but you won't be able to do it as fast as you could if you were just rowing in that direction overall. A quick look at our active net merit list today reveals a real difference between DPR, even just in the industry's top 100 net merit bulls. That's about 20 pounds difference when we cut that list in half by DPR, top and bottom. That's 20 pounds of combined fat and protein, or almost 400 pounds of milk difference between the top group and the bottom group for DPR. This really tells you that if we're selecting heavily for DPR, we're likely losing out on our ability to drive production forward in our system today. So the question is selection for DPR worth the cost of lost production? The reality is, we don't really ever take our foot off the gas for production. Production will always be something that we select for, and really that trend has been quite consistent over the last 50 years. We've continued to get milk, fat, protein, whatever your production value is. This is something that continues to drive forward, and it's probably explaining why we haven't been able to make much progress for daughter pregnancy rate today. Then the other factor that we often forget is the fact that DPR does not really calculate our heifer reproduction. DPR as a days open trait is really only calculated from mature cows, and this fact alone should give us pause, because our heifers, well, every cow that becomes a cow has to become pregnant as a heifer first. It just makes sense, and really drives home the fact that we need to start to be able to focus on our heifer reproduction as well. All right, then our final piece here is our opportunity.
Perdón, hago una pequeña interrupción de un segundo, Phil. Simplemente para las personas que ingresaron un poco más tarde en la reunión, tal vez no siguieron las instrucciones de la traducción en simultáneo. Hago un recordatorio para quienes no ingresaron. Deben ir a la barra de herramientas que tiene Zoom debajo, y en el centro de la pantalla debajo hay un área donde dice interpretación. En esa área tienen que ingresar y seleccionar la interpretación en español para poder escuchar la traducción en simultáneo. Simplemente como recordatorio para quienes ingresaron un poquito más tarde. Gracias, disculpas por la interrupción.
Excellent. Ready? All right, so finally our third part. This is where we have the opportunity for a shift in our strategy when it comes to selection for fertility. Today, our environment around reproduction has really shifted. It's really a shift now toward efficient repro, and where we make more precise decisions based on the semen type we're using in the cows that will receive that semen. This is where within the US, there's really been a major push toward beef on dairy. But I think globally even, we've been cutting back the number of replacements that are needed to replace our herds today. So whether beef on dairy is happening in your part of the world, or whether there's really just a focus on your inventory of heifers, we have a real opportunity to focus on repro efficiency. When we look at our cow repro efficiency, we're looking at trying to put more options on the table. Most of our cows today, or certainly a high percentage of our cows today, are still mature cows are bred to conventional semen, where if we had better performance on sexed semen, that would be an opportunity for more sexed semen use across our more mature cows. And certainly we need better performance here, and we still can't sacrifice our production potential to get there. We know we need to continue to breed for more milk production. And then finally, our heifer reproduction is becoming even more important. Within the US, we have the lowest heifer inventory numbers that we've had in 20 years. This means every heifer coming through the pipeline must become pregnant sooner than later and do it in an efficient manner. Chances are usually pretty good she'll be exposed to a unit of sexed semen, sorted semen in that strategy as well. And we continue to have opportunity to improve our repro here. Back when conventional semen was the primary usage, heifers didn't get a lot of attention. We knew that we could throw some semen at them. They wanted to get pregnant, and we wouldn't have to put much attention here. Of course, when we introduced sorted semen, we took a step back on our efficiency. And this really opens the door for us to derive more repro efficiency back into our heifers at this level today. And then in some herds today, we even see our cows outperforming heifers for reproduction. Certainly our cows have more tailored synchronization protocols and more attention put on them. And this really drives home that need for heifer focus today. I think really there's a great opportunity in our industry to shift away from DPR. DPR was a fine tool when it was introduced, but today we have more precise way to manage our reproduction on the side of our conception rate traits. That would be cow conception rate and heifer conception rate. These traits more directly affect the things that our farms are actually breeding for today. Conception rate traits predict the ability to turn an insemination into a pregnancy, and this efficiency is really driving this need for efficiency is driving this strategy change in our industry today. This is calculated from pregnancy diagnosis data, whether that's on cows or on heifers. So it's a more direct measurement of our reproduction today, as opposed to what daughter pregnancy rate does. These traits really aren't new. They've been around for over 10 years. They've been in net merit for over 10 years and have existed for almost 15 years. And we have a track record of actually being able to make improvement on these traits. And then not to be ignored is the fact that there's less resistance between our conception rate traits and production. Here in the red box, you'll see the correlation values for DPR versus our three production traits, milk, fat, and protein. And we can see CCR still has a negative correlation. It's not quite as strong as what DPR is, but really that heifer conception rate has almost no correlation with production. And this would stand to reason. Our heifers aren't lactating when they're being inseminated for the first time, and that really opens up the opportunity to drive our efficiency on these heifers while they're not lactating. And then certainly it gives us that ability to start to focus on heifer repro through that heifer conception rate. Okay, so how does Alta look today when we look at CCR and HCR? Today, I looked over Alta's 100 best net merit bulls today, and all of them are positive for HCR. That means all 100 of them will continue to make some improvement to our heifer reproduction, and 87% of them are also positive for cow conception rate today. Combined, that's a pretty powerful message to say our bulls are making quite a bit more progress. And then when we look at this in relation to DPR, only about 1/3 of the bulls in the top 100 net merit are positive for DPR. This really shows you the story that we're trying to tell, where we have that opportunity to shift toward a better product, both in making cows and heifers that do well in our systems, but also in finding bulls that do what we want them to do in our lineups today. I put Alta Sampson on the screen today. He's a former peak mating sire who's done quite well in our system, making sons. Certainly, we have sons that are going to be entering AI here in the next few months as well. But he's a great example of a bull that's good fertility and high production, but isn't very good for DPR. This tells you the fact that we can still have bulls that will sire both production and fertility, where we don't really have that opportunity if we're only selecting for daughter pregnancy rate today. And what's interesting is we have some clones also entering the lineup from Alta Sampson, so I expect his semen to be quite readily available, whether it's from him directly or from his clones. They're going to sire the exact same thing with the same DNA. So pretty exciting times, and a bull that will certainly have a lot of traction in our markets globally. And then I couldn't do a peak presentation without putting a few bull calves up on the screen for you to think about. But really, what I'm excited about, and really what we start to see to a greater extent, is this difference between DPR and our conception rate traits. These younger elite production bulls, elite index bulls today, really show you that our production continues to drive forward quite aggressively, whether that's for milk or for our components. And we're able to really drive these numbers for conception rate quite a bit higher, even though our DPR continues to fall behind. It's not a trait that's really compatible with production. It really shows that we have that opportunity to continue to select for fertility and production at the same time. So just wrapping things up here now, what tools are in your toolbox today when it comes to repro efficiency? Hopefully you've gained a few more tools. I'll just do a quick summary though. I think it's important to match the goal of a dairy to the tools that are used. I expect you'll hear David say the same kind of thing. This is what Alta's been talking about for a long time. Get to know the goals of your dairy and then match the strategy to the dairy you're working with. If we're looking to try to maximize each insemination, really our conception rate traits, whether that's for cows or heifers, is really the two traits that are going to deliver the most here. If longevity is what you're after, if we're trying to get more cows into the next lactation, productive life, even though it's been around for 30 years, is still a great trait at delivering that kind of fertility. If reducing days open is still necessary for the herds that you work with, DPR probably still makes sense. This isn't a bad trait. It just needs to be used in the right way. But DPR is great for cows in this situation. Early first calving, or EFC, is a trait that we could be using in our heifers to reduce the age that they calve in at the first time. It would behave quite similarly to how DPR behaves today in our system. Now, I've introduced a lot of traits. I've got 4. If we're looking at just one number, if you say, give me one number that speaks to all of this, the fertility index, this is published by Holstein Association USA. Fertility index may be your go-to trait here today. This index has actually changed. Even in the time that I started talking about fertility, we've seen fertility index shift a lot of weight from DPR to CCR. We still have about 80% of that index weighted toward cow fertility and only about 20% of that weighted on heifer. I don't know that I love that breakdown still, but it does show us that we're moving away from DPR. As a little sneak peek, I think that Peak will actually be developing our own fertility index. So when you see that out on the horizon, you'll be familiar with what that's going to deliver. I think you'll see a little bit more weight on that heifer fertility. At the end of the day, though, I think all genetic traits are tools to be used, and this is something that I do quite regularly when I've got a wrench in my pocket and I'm trying to drive a nail. I'll try to use the wrong tool. Well, guess what? It doesn't do a great job. I think at the end of the day, we have the opportunity to shift our tool for fertility away from DPR to a better tool in our toolbox today. So I appreciate your attention. If you have any questions, feel free to jump in. I would welcome any questions at this time.
Excelente, Phil, muchísimas gracias. Bueno, abrimos el espacio para preguntas. Si quieren, como les decía, pueden escribirlas ahí en la opción de preguntas y respuestas. Y si no, directamente los invito a quien tenga alguna pregunta, a abrir el micrófono y formular la pregunta. No sean tímidos, ¿eh?
Santiago, buenas tardes a todos.
Hola, Claudia, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien, gracias. A mí me gustaría preguntar, veo que en el índice de fertilidad nuevo está un parámetro que se llama como gestación temprana o algo así, preñez más temprana. Sí, por favor, nos explica un poquito ese parámetro. Gracias.
Sure. Early, so EFC stands for early first calving. And as we see this number increase, so a higher number means fewer days to that animal's first calving when they start as a heifer and become a first lactation cow. It's really designed for reducing the age that animals would start their very first lactation.
Perfecto, gracias.
And the only thing I would add to that, Phil, is that early first calving means less days that she's on the expense side of the ledger, eating feed, but not making any production or revenue side. So that's the thought process about early first calving, is that we reduce those number of days that she's a burden and get her to the production side sooner.
Absolutely.
Muchas gracias.
Excelente. ¿Alguna otra pregunta?
Buenas tardes, Santiago. Soy Álvaro González
Álvaro.
de México.
¿Cómo estás, Álvaro?
Muy bien, gracias.
Adelante.
Gracias. Yo tengo una pregunta. Para el Fertility Index, ¿qué número deberíamos de estar buscando en los catálogos para hacer la recomendación a los clientes?
Bien.
I continue to believe that putting these traits into a bigger index is really what we should be after. Whenever we put a threshold on, if we say it needs to be a positive number, inevitably we start to get our selection out of focus. And I would still recommend putting it into a larger selection index. Whether that's a custom index or an index like the industry has today, like net merit or TPI.
Perfecto, creo que queda aclarada, Álvaro, la respuesta. Creo que ahí eso conecta mucho con la siguiente presentación que vamos a tener de David, donde él habla justamente acerca de eso, ¿no? No de poner filtros, sino darle un peso específico a cada uno de los rasgos que consideramos importante para el sistema de producción o para las necesidades de cada productor. Seguimos con las preguntas. Tenemos tiempo para alguna pregunta más.
Sure.
Ha unido gente de Paraguay, Panamá. Bueno, a ver quién se anima a una siguiente pregunta.
Hola a todos, saludos desde Ecuador.
Hola, Darío.
Hablamos de vida productiva, tal vez nos podrían recomendar, hay un número límite como para qué toro es muy superior en vida productiva o qué recomendación dan de qué número hacia arriba o hacia abajo podemos usar y no usar.
Oh, absolutely. And this will be unfortunately a similar answer to my answer on fertility index, but really putting productive life in to an index is really the best way to use it. What's interesting to me is that our net merit started when we introduced productive life with a really high number for productive life in a weighting here, pushing 30% of that index, I believe. Over time, that number has reduced. And then recently, that number has increased again, largely because we've realized that so many of those health traits that we're concerned about can also be accounted for just in that single number. So for me, I really support productive life. I would never tell you, though, only use bowls above a certain number for that. I would just always recommend leaving it in a selection index, but I would weight that trait quite heavily in that selection index.
Perfecto. Buenísimo. Bueno, vamos, si quieren, con una última pregunta para Phil, antes de liberarlo. Seguramente lo liberemos a él, así que no pierdan la oportunidad. Tenemos la suerte de tener hoy aquí a un especialista en genética, referente del programa PIC y de la empresa PIC en Estados Unidos, responsable de la selección de toros a nivel global. Así que los invito a una última pregunta para Phil.
Hola Santiago, soy Juan de Ecuador, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, Juan.
Yo tengo una pregunta, ¿qué tan heredable es el CCR y el HCR para ver si tomas mucho en cuenta el momento de seleccionar un toro o no es tan heredable?
Perfecto, gracias, Juan.
Both traits are quite low, about 1 or 2% heritability when we look at their combined heritabilities. However, heritability doesn't tell us what traits are important. It just tells us what to expect in terms of response over time. And what we realize is that in our farms today, where we are able to manage a lot of the variables, whether that's environment or nutrition or parlor management, whatever that is, these lower heritability traits actually will have a more favorable effective heritability because we're keeping a lot of the other variables constant. So what I would say is you would still see those traits even in the next generation making an impact, even though they only have a pretty low heritability number as a standard.
Perfecto, excelente, Phil. Bueno, y te agradecemos muchísimo por este tiempo, por la predisposición para estar con nosotros. Por supuesto, a todos los asistentes, si quedan o si surgen preguntas para Phil en los próximos días, luego de repensar un poco esta presentación, con mucho gusto me las pueden hacer llegar a mí, a Mariana, a Luis, para que hagamos la consulta a Phil, y seguramente siempre con esa excelente predisposición que él tiene vamos a tener una respuesta muy rápida. Así que, Phil, te agradecemos mucho, te enviamos un abrazo, seguimos en contacto y invitamos, bueno, si quieres despedirte.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for involving me in your event. And like you mentioned, I'm always happy to assist however I'm able to for your market. So have a great day and enjoy David's presentation. I'm going to stay on for this for a little while and see how it goes.
Perfecto. Bueno, muchas gracias, Phil. David, te damos la bienvenida. Ya hice una pequeña introducción para quienes ingresaron un poco más tarde. Les hago la introducción de David. David es el responsable y especialista en programa Advantage en Estados Unidos, pero además de eso, él hace más de 28 años que está trabajando para Alta Genetics en Estados Unidos, y es también responsable y especialista en genética, y es responsable de la selección de toros que hace Alta para incorporar no solo en Estados Unidos, sino a nivel global. Es el coordinador de ese grupo de selección. Trabaja muy cercano a PIC también para determinar las necesidades que Alta tiene a nivel global. Y es un tremendo especialista en genética que hoy nos va a hablar acerca de cómo abordar a cada uno de nuestros clientes con una herramienta sencilla que tenemos disponible y cómo tratar de interpretar y proponer la mejor propuesta genética para cada uno de nuestros clientes. Así que David, te damos la bienvenida y te agradecemos por el tiempo.
Well, thank you, Santiago. Always a pleasure to be with your group. I'm excited to share maybe a review for some folks, but there's always something we can learn by repetition. And I'm excited to share a little bit and dovetail a little bit on what Phil talked about. So I'm going to try to share my screen and we'll see if that works. And I'm going to do here. And someone can let me know, because now I can't see you, what we have here. Can you see that now?
Yes, David.
Perfect. Perfect. And now I can see you guys. So as mentioned, been with the company for a long time. I've done lots of different jobs, from selling semen to taking cow pictures to providing daughter comments of all the daughters we've seen. And as we went through the genomic era, we transitioned Advantage from a progeny test program to a validation program, and really focused on the Concept Plus information that you get and are able to be confident in on the sire fertility side. Prior to my Alta career, I graduated from Virginia Tech and went back and bought my home farm, and then we moved it to Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. And then when I decided to do something different, I came to work with my friends at Alta Genetics. So very glad I did, and everything happens for a reason. And I'm excited to be with you here today. So what we believe at Alta, that we believe that genetics impact profitability, that it has a place. It's not the most money a dairyman will spend, but it will have a high impact on what their capabilities are. If you only bought low priced bulls, you're probably not going to get the best. If you buy medium, you're probably going to be in the middle. If you aim higher, you get higher. So that's the exciting thing about genetics. We can share that information through proof in the numbers, through Alta Blue Link tools, and we know that trait correlations are important, and we talked about that with Phil. In addition, Alta believes that we need a great environment, so those genetics that they purchase have an ability to be expressed. So if we have the highest genetic animal in the world and we don't feed her enough water or enough feed, she's not going to produce. So we really count on dairymen providing a great environment for genetics to thrive. And that includes getting calves started. There's so many studies on getting that right colostrum in them right away. That's all part of the environment. But what it comes to is we get more production at the end. I think the green space is average daily gain with dairy animals, that we can do a better job at that, and then make better decisions with our young stock as they're being raised, and it will pay great dividends. We believe that a great reproductive plan with high service rates and strict protocols are important. We believe that we should take advantage of the tools that we have, take advantage of the genomics, the selection sire index, the herd segmentation. So, we're in a place, especially in the US, where a lot of our females are getting beef semen. And we should be the best at Alta to share which of those females should be the next generation on that farm. And it's a big thing to do, is to decide which females deserve to get the sex semen and which get beef. In addition, we need correct ID for that to happen. And that's something the farm, and you can always be a help on correcting IDs on the farm. And early on in Advantage, we found that, there was upwards of more than 20% misidentification. So if we want to fix as much of that as we can, because if we're going to make a suggestion that a cow should get sex semen and be part of the next generation, we better have the right IDs. And we need to share that, how that's important with the dairymen for them making decisions and affecting their profitability moving forward. Some of the tools, the conventional, using beef and embryos. We believe that competition is real, that all the studs have really good bulls. And, we get stuck at, hey, this stud averages such and such for whatever trait we're talking about, milk or fat or protein. But not every dairy is going to use all the bulls. So it's a silly competition. And we should really be looking at the bulls that work best for a particular dairy. But finally, Alta believes that the people that we have in the field, make the difference. It's really your training, your experience, your passion for the industry, and the passion for each client that you have to be successful. We're in the business of credibility. Hey, if we're going to suggest something, we really need to be confident and proud to suggest things for a dairyman to do better. And it's really about your attitude when you go on farm, that you are a positive influence on each dairy that you work at. So that's my little short rah-rah speech, but I'm really here to talk about developing a customized plan. And many of you may have heard this before, but it's simple. It's 3 questions. How do you get paid for your milk? Why do your cows leave the herd? And what kind of cow works best in your dairy? So when you're talking about how you get paid for the milk, that's the revenue stream. Some farms get paid on protein and fat pounds or kilos. Some farms get paid only for the white water that comes out of a cow. They would be very different indexes, because their revenue streams, what they rely on for making decisions on a dairy, is really affected by that. So when we talk about paid for your milk, it's about production. And more often than not, it's going to be the biggest part of any index that you look at, because it's the most impactful. It's about 30% heritable, the production traits. And so it's a highly heritable trait that you're going to get what you ask for. So why not ask for a lot? Why do cows leave the herd? That's the health part. So when we think about, okay, do they leave because their udders fall off? Do they leave because they get mastitis? Do they leave because they're lame? Do they leave because they're not getting pregnant? They're the major ones, and it really can be impacted by genetics, and we should include that in our health index. And then finally, the cow that works best in your operation. And it doesn't have to mean anything other than, can these cows fit in the parlor? Can they fit in the cubicles or the free stalls that we have? Can your systems handle these cows in a very nice manner and a proper manner? So those are the main 3 questions that I would ask when we build an index. So an index only has 100 points, whether it's net merit, whether it's TPI, whether it's any industry or customized index, there's only a total of 100 points. So you have to have the discussion with the dairyman of what drives your milk check, why your cows leave, and what kind of cows do you really like to go out and look at in the morning. So it looks like a lot, but it really isn't when you have and sit and talk with the dairyman, and nobody ever talks to the dairyman this way. So I think it's a unique opportunity to be different. Remember, everybody has good bulls, so the difference is going to be you. So the way you speak and talk about their business and getting them to share, you know, what really makes them happy and what really they have a difficulty with. So, I'm going to skip ahead here because what I want to do in a couple minutes is go to a live version of our bull search tool, but we always want to do phenotypic calls, because if we're trying to look at the heifers, we want those low average daily gain ones to be gone. The other one will do better in a less crowded pen. The sick and injured ones need to leave because they will never perform to their genetic level. So that's number one. Number two, we need to know whether a herd is going to stay the same size or whether they're growing. So that's really important to know, because, hey, as you're going to have less calls if you're growing, and you're probably going to use more sexed semen, more gender selected semen if you're an expanding herd. But it's also important in those static herds, the ones that want to remain the same size, because, hey, they want to make every stall better. So it's an important thing to know. Sire selection, we'll talk about that in a minute. And then when we segment the herd, you know, who gets sexed and who gets beef. And we also can do pregnancy rankings. So if we're not going to know a genetic information, we can do a ranking in utero, so that we'll know when the calf hits the ground, if she's below our threshold for animals that we really are our best ones, we can maybe let somebody else raise that animal, and we won't take up valuable space with ours. So this is oftentimes when there's limited space. So so the main key points from this is that production, health, and type are important, and you need to sit with your dairyman to do it, and we're going to walk through a little bit of that. The trait correlations and being aware that when you're asking for a lot of production, it's harder to get the fertility stuff. But as Phil indicated, we have a better understanding of which tools are better for that. And I really am excited about having that discussion. In fact, I had that discussion this week already, and introducing the fact we need to pull away from DPR and really embrace the cow and conception and heifer conception rate. Be aware that if you change a plan, sires may rank differently. So be aware of that. I would say, as Phil indicated, stick with the genetic plan. When you start to introduce thresholds of, say, 1,000 of milk, or they need to be positive DPR, or they need to be A2, or they need no haplotypes. Anytime we do that stuff, we are shrinking the pool of bulls that we have to select from. So you're limiting your progress. And finally, I've left this in for a couple of years with this presentation, that herd bulls can be part of the solution at some dairies, but you're going to be prepared when you rank them, the daughters of those herd bulls, they're going to be inferior to the AI bulls that they select. So there will, so they need to be prepared that, hey, if we're going to segment the herd bull daughters will not meet up with the rapidly improving AI bulls that we have today. And as we go through the next 6 or 8 months, we're going to be hearing more and more about the base change in the US in April and the massive improvement that we've made in the last 5 years in our genetics. And so that's a little tease for another seminar at some point. So I'm going to quit sharing and I'm going to go to, let's see if I, and I'll share again. Has everyone seen Bull Search?
No, not yet.
Is it not sharing yet?
No.
It appears to on mine. Let me
David, it was almost like a 2-step process where you select the box and then you hit share.
I'm trying to get to. There we go. Now, if I do it and bring this back here.
David,
share.
Si tú quieres, yo puedo compartir y tú me vas indicando. Ahí está.
I got it.
Ahí está. Yes.
Yeah, it was a 2-share process. So I picked Argentina, and people have seen this before. I guess since they won the World Cup, they're still until they're defeated, they're still the champs. So we're gonna go with Argentina. Hopefully, many of you have seen this, and it'll be review. But this is a great place to work with a dairyman or work on your own prior to doing a visit, where you can already be thinking about what kind of bulls might this dairyman like. And so there's lots of buttons up here. I'm going to leave it in the US proof. I hope that's okay. We can have the ability to look up individual bulls in this section here, but with the plus, it can take us, let me make sure it's all going to work. There it is. So this is what you would see if you were in Argentina and you were looking to build an index. So you'll see that these all add up to 100 points. They're all pre-selected. You can use these, or you can build them on your own. But typically we want to utilize this in this way, that we would pick all production and no conformation. And in this particular case, they put 35% on protein and 30% on fat and 0 on milk. I was at a herd yesterday that wants to put 25 here and 25 here and 0 here. So is that the right index for them? If the dairyman thinks that's the way he gets paid with selling milk and getting paid a little bit on fat, and he doesn't care at all about protein, then that's a good index for him on production. So in addition, it already populates the health and efficiency part too. So in this herd, we were going to do 25 here, and we had the discussion about moving DPR down to 5 points. And we made cow conception rate 10 and heifer conception rate 10. and we didn't put any on somatic cell. So, and we didn't put any on body conformation. And so this was our 50-50-0 index with this herd that we worked with yesterday. So if you had a herd that wanted to do only A2, you do a drop-down menu here and you put it in here. But that would be another filter. In addition, if you wanted to exclude haplotypes, you could do that, or you wanted to include Concept Plus, you could do it in this section. And then if you had type traits that were important, or you wanted to see prices or limit, prices go in here, or limit to shorten your list, you can do it. But the good thing is, once you get this, you can save it, and you save it at the bottom here. And then you would have to name it and save. So then you don't have to go, so mine are saved up here, that I don't have to redo those every time. All right. So the magic happens when you work with the dairyman to get the index that they like, and then you hit search. And
we lost your share screen, David.
Oh, it did. Oh my goodness. Sorry, I didn't mean.
Nos estamos por
Oh, I know where I hit it by mistake, and we're back.
It was just briefly. No worries.
Ahí está.
Yeah, no, I was trying to get to my my different saved selections. So in this instance, the 50-50 index with no weight on protein gives us this ranking of index. And it's not surprising that our star Alta Olaf heads that list by a bunch, by over 100 points. It's amazing. And you can edit the different traits that you see on this screen. So if I want to include CCR and HCR, which Phil has now taught us that, hey, that's pretty important, then we would do this. So then they appear right here. So now we can look at a group of bulls and start to make a presentation. So how do we know if we had the right index? If these are bulls that the dairymen really like and would buy anyway, we're really on the right track. So if we took the top 5 bulls here, we have the opportunity to compare, and we get, quite a good group of bulls. I mean, we only had 50% on production, and look what we got. We did very, very well. 180 or 79 CFP and 2,082 of milk. Remember, they wanted milk because that's what they got. So that's what they sell. They don't get paid for fat and protein. So the fat's important, but not maybe the protein. So the other thing we can do here is we could export this to, and you would get an Excel spreadsheet. If you know your customer and know what they like to look at, you can share in an Excel form. And it's working, and I'm going to share it here in a second when it comes. There we go. So I'm going to put it over here. So then you have the ability to share, and we can get an average here, or we can evaluate these bulls with the dairyman to say, and maybe you don't need all these columns and you get rid of some of them. You can share that. The other thing we can do is we can go to this button and do a professional presentation. So we want to print the index. We want one bull per page. You can have a cover sheet if you want, but then using this to be able to share with the dairyman your professionalism, and this is what we have to offer you. So it takes a few seconds to make it, and it downloads it just like it does the Excel format, and instantly you've got a little bull book for them. It's a tremendous tool, but the biggest part of it is walking through with your dairyman, what the index is. And so, if you have this report, you can share the individual bull, the averages of the group for all the traits, their overall index for this one is 1119. And it can also help you as you get proof time to proof time of where you've been and where you're going to as well. So a tremendous tool that's really easy, and it makes it a valuable presentation when you're talking with dairymen. Okay. The last thing I wanted to look at is if we put some filters in here. So let me get back to let's see. Am I doing this? Let me stop sharing again, and I'm going to go back here, here. Here we go. And I'm going to share again. Sorry. And
now we can see.
I'm sharing the wrong thing. Can we see this?
Looks good.
Yes.
Okay.
The PDF.
So yes. So if we go back and we pick this index, and we're going to leave it here, but if we said we wanted to only have bulls
No, solo estamos viendo la
that
pantalla
were
estática. David, estamos viendo la pantalla estática.
right. Okay, I didn't think so. Got it. Okay, let me stop sharing. Here we go.
Sí.
Is that good?
Ahora sí.
Yeah. So again, if we picked here and we said in this situation, we wanted only bulls greater and equal to 1,500 ml. What are we doing? We're putting a filter in, and now we only have bulls that are only 1,500 pounds of milk or more. So it limits the number of bulls. We only have 27 bulls to pick from. And when we take that off and we look again without it, we've got 95 bulls to choose from. So the opportunity for thresholds is really tough, because if the bull that was the best for them is 1390, he doesn't show up on the list. So thresholds can be really hold back genetic progress, is what my message is here today. So we have a great tool. If you ever have any trouble with it, please reach out, and don't be afraid to play with it. And it can be a really important tool as you try to develop a genetic plan with the dairy. So that's what I wanted to share today, and be more than glad to answer any questions.
Excelente, David. Bueno, muchísimas gracias por la presentación, súper clara, dinámica y didáctica también, así que espero que haya sido de mucha utilidad para todos. Si hay preguntas para David, es una excelente oportunidad para aprovecharlo. Los invito a abrir el micrófono. Aquí María Alexandra hace una consulta, agradecida por la herramienta. María Alexandra de Colombia pregunta acerca de si los portafolios están actualizados por país. El grupo de toros está actualizado por país.
Yes. So bulls that are eligible in each individual country should, if we, yeah, and I'm not sharing anymore, I understand that, but if you hit the country button, it should be the bulls that are available in your country.
Perfecto, excelente, David. Ahí es importante, María Alexandra, también verificar eso en cada país y si hay alguna diferencia, es importante que nos comuniquen como para que podamos también comunicar al departamento de marketing y hacer las correcciones, agregados o modificaciones que hagan falta.
Perfecto, eso te iba a preguntar. Si hay alguna falla, te informamos, ¿cierto?
Correcto.
Ok.
Ahí veo que Rubén tiene micrófono abierto, seguramente para alguna pregunta para David.
Sí, hola, mucho gusto, Rubén de Ecuador. Una consulta, ¿cuál es la fórmula que mejor para David le parece para el tema para trabajar acá al Ecuador? De 50-50, 60-30, ¿cuál es la tendencia que están usando más si queremos buscar fortaleza más que todo? ¿Qué nos recomendaría él?
So every farm is different. And the purpose of customized indexes, we think that the industry indexes may not be as direct and to the point as a customized index. So if you look at net merit or TPI, they'll have 1% on this trait and 1% on that trait. And it really doesn't move the needle as far as do the answering the three questions that we talked about. You know, how do you get paid for your milk? You know, why do your cows leave? And what kind of cows you? So the reason to do a customized index is really to the point, and we are using values that impact profitability. And so I don't necessarily would have a good answer to say, hey, in Ecuador, you should use this index, because I think it's very customer dependent, and it allows you to have a discussion rather than them just picking off a list. But thank you for the question.
Ok, gracias.
Excelente la pregunta, Rubén, y excelente la respuesta, David. Estamos abiertos a más preguntas, todavía tenemos un tiempo, así que bienvenidos.
Hay una pregunta, Santiago. Hay muchos clientes que insisten, ¿no?, en trabajar con los famosos puntos de corte para los rasgos, ¿no?, que quieren toros arriba de tantas mil libras de leche, que quieren que sean positivos en todo. Muchos clientes quieren el toro perfecto siempre, ¿no? ¿Cuál es el consejo de David para tratar eso con esos clientes, ¿no?, y hacerlos ver que pierden progreso genético haciendo eso?
Well, not all of our traits are extreme traits. And if Phil has a better presentation than me on this one, but it is, some of the other traits should be medium traits. Some of the foot and leg traits should be medium traits, not everything to the right, or certainly not to the left on some. But, those production traits we want to increase production as much as we can, each generation. So those kind really do go to the max because we're trying to raise the ceiling or the ability for genetic mating to do better. But on the individual type traits, we've got many that should be lower traits. Maybe even stature should be lower. Maybe there's too far low. So it's more maybe of a medium trait, depending on the farm. So there's no right answer to your question about, should they all be to the right? Well, I guess the answer is no, they shouldn't all be to the right. But that's what we've been trained to when we see those kind of standard deviation charts. And we need to educate our dairymen that, when we're looking at, rear leg set, it needs to be more moderate, those kind of things.
Santiago, tengo una pregunta.
Excelente.
También
de México.
De la misma forma en que hay ganaderos que ponen límites, algunos ganaderos que están utilizando la prueba genómica de Zoetis, ahora piden toros basándose solamente en el rasgo del DWP. ¿Qué opina David acerca de basarse solamente en buscar toros con alto DWP?
Yes. So DWP is an industry index, just like net merit and TPI. When you think about the daughter wellness dollars, it is a trait weighted about, and Phil can validate, about 35% on production. So it's more of a health index than it is a production index. So it's not wrong, but you're leaving some production on the table when you go for the highest on the DWP, is what I would, but they rank pretty well too, but it's an index designed to, remember, Zoetis is in the health business. So they're going to look at maximizing cows that need more health traits. So.
Excelente. María Alexandra de Colombia también tiene una pregunta.
So, I guess is to educate yourself on what is in the, and if your dairymen are using it, you really need to understand what's in that index so that you can share and have that proper discussion with them. Is this really what you want and what you need? And if it is, fine, but have the discussion.
Clarísimo. María Alexandra, ¿quieres hacer la pregunta?
Sí, Santiago, gracias. Primero, agradecer a los dos conferencistas, excelentes sus intervenciones, y una pregunta un poco direccionada hacia la competencia. ¿Cómo todo esto que vimos hoy nos hace más fuertes, más competitivos? ¿Cuál es la recomendación de ustedes, de todo el equipo Alta, para usar estas herramientas de la manera más eficiente y mostrarnos competitivos? Hablar diferente, ¿cuáles serían esos tips que nos darían como representantes Alta en Latinoamérica para lograr grandes resultados con estas charlas que tuvimos hoy?
So I would say take time to practice of working with a partner or being on the computer and walking through how we sort these bulls, because that will give you confidence that you'll be able to do it with the dairyman. And just understanding that if you ask for high production, it's going to be harder to get health traits because of those correlations. So it's about practice, and I would encourage you to talk out loud with your partners and practice, because once you hear yourself say things, it's not and we do this a lot in training, is if you say things out loud and you do it with your training partners, it's a lot easier when you go to the farm and you're doing it for real. And maybe Phil has some other insight on that, but that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I would say from my perspective, keep the most important things the most important things. There are a lot of things in this business we can put our attention on, but not everything in this business really delivers impact for our farms. Genetics is one of those things that can deliver an impact for our farm. And we don't need to focus on every trait, even in the genetic world. Pick the traits that are the most important things and make an index, make a plan, and keep the most important things the most important things. I think if you're true to that, your farms will see that. And even if you don't deliver it smoothly, if you know what their most important things are and you have a plan that reflects that, I think the rest of it flows from there.
Gracias.
For sure.
Bárbaro. Y Leonardo Quintero también tiene una pregunta. Leonardo.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Buenas noches. Gracias, David y Phil, por la presentación. En cuanto a lo que nos estaban hablando de tener confianza y hablar con nuestros clientes, sin duda, yo acá en Colombia utilizo la aplicación de Alta para móvil y para tablet. ¿Sí? Cuando él nos hablaba de la aplicación como la computadora, me he dado cuenta que es una gran herramienta, pero uno no puede seleccionar ni comparar los toros que le quieras recomendar en cuanto a su granja desde un móvil. La aplicación los puede seleccionar varios toros que tú le des a recomendar sobre esos toros o esos puntos específicos que el productor quiera en su finca.
Well, at this point, obviously, we don't have that capability. I mean, we can rank the bulls by a certain index. We can click on the individual bulls. It's not dynamic enough as the computer is at this point. There's a long list of things that we need IT to do. We're going to be focused on Blue Link in a lot of ways, on those dollars that money we spend on IT. The app works well for certain things, but you're correct. It probably is better to go to the computer when you're trying to do these groups of bulls that you're going to present a team of bulls to a dairy. It's a little bit harder. You can look up individual bulls good on the app, but not the groups. And I agree, but I don't expect that it's going to happen soon. But if you put your request in, Santiago, put it in the budget.
Así es.
Eso sonó muy bien y quedó grabado, Santiago.
María Alexandra creo que tiene una nueva pregunta.
No, te decía que eso sonó muy bien y quedó grabado.
No, no escucha, no escucha.
Ok.
Bueno, ¿alguna otra pregunta más para David o para Phil?
David, qué buen recuerdo de ese pendón que tiene del año 1982 en el fondo.
Yeah. Yes.
Bueno, excelente. Bueno, si no hay más preguntas. Darío tiene una pregunta.
Bueno, yo quería compartirles, en Ecuador estamos ya usando el programa de Alta y nos ha servido muchísimo. Quiero ver si puedo compartir al chat. Estamos comparando los toros de la competencia y la verdad somos muy superiores en números y para las personas les puedo decir que funciona y pueden ver la gran diferencia. A veces uno dice, solo le gana por un punto, 2 puntos
Yes.
en cierta característica, pero somos muy superiores.
Bueno, gracias, Darío.
Yeah, that's always a good discussion to have with the dairyman that, you know, it's accountability, but you have to be careful on how you present that. So, if the competitor is their best friend, it could be trouble. But in the right way, you can present that information.
Muy bien. Bueno, excelente. Bueno, lo mismo que con Phil, si quedan preguntas pendientes para David, pueden enviármelas a mí, a Mariana o a Luis y con mucho gusto se las vamos a hacer llegar. El objetivo de hoy era de alguna manera poder brindarles más herramientas para cuando enfrentemos a un cliente o visitemos a un prospecto, realmente tengamos más autoridad técnica para estar frente a ellos. Siempre debemos recordar que nosotros somos, cada uno de los aquí presentes es el especialista en genética para cada uno de esos productores que visita. Entonces es importante que estemos actualizados, es importante que entendamos que ellos están esperando un buen conocimiento técnico de parte nuestra y todas estas herramientas que hoy presentamos y que presentó David ahora en esta última parte son herramientas que nos permiten comportarnos de esa manera en frente al cliente, ¿no? Y mostrarles realmente el valor que tiene la genética para ellos y de alguna manera colaborar con ellos para que tomen la mejor decisión posible, pensando en la productividad y en la rentabilidad de cada uno de sus negocios. También adhiero a lo que decía David y a lo que decían Phil acerca de la importancia de entender las necesidades de cada productor en esas líneas, ¿no? En cómo ellos están recibiendo el pago de la leche, cuáles son las principales razones por las cuales se están descartando animales y cuál es el tipo de animal que funciona para ese establecimiento. Con esas tres simples preguntas nosotros vamos a tener una excelente orientación acerca de las necesidades del cliente y a partir de ahí podemos empezar a delinear una propuesta a medida. Esta herramienta lo que nos permite es generar propuestas a medidas y generar índices propios para cada productor, con todo lo que eso significa. Así que espero que hayan disfrutado muchísimo. David, te agradezco muchísimo el tiempo, te doy un espacio para que te despidas.
Now, I enjoyed visiting with her. I love the questions, and it's always good to meet your fellow colleagues from around the world. And I'm glad to do it. And reach out anytime directly as well. It's fine. Yeah, look forward to seeing you somewhere along the line in the future.
Excelente, excelente. Bueno, David, muchas gracias. Phil, muchas gracias. Agradezco también nuevamente a Soledad, a Mariana por toda la organización y a todos ustedes por el tiempo que es muy valioso hoy. Hemos dedicado casi 2 horas a esta reunión. Espero que haya sido de utilidad. Con mucho gusto vamos también a estar haciendo algún tipo de encuesta para conocer cuáles son los temas que les gustaría abarcar en el futuro, en una próxima reunión, y quedamos abiertos y a disposición como siempre para cualquier consulta o duda que pueda surgir. Les agradecemos muchísimo y que tengan una excelente tarde para todos.
Muchas gracias a
Muchas
ustedes,
gracias a todos el
Santiago,
equipo.
Mariano.
Gracias, gracias.
Gracias.
Luis.
Gracias, Santiago.
Gracias.
Chao, chao.
Gracias, buenas noches a
Gracias,
todos.
muy amable.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Chao,
Gracias,
muchas
buenas
gracias.
tardes.
Buenas noches.